Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I'm delighted to be attending the inaugural ASEAN Future of Work conference, which is part of the HR Tech Festival Asia, organized by HRM Asia. I congratulate HRM Asia for making this event possible, and I look forward to being able to participate in future editions in person. Now, while it may be difficult in this year of all years to conceive of the future of work without COVID-19 intruding in some way, I think we should nevertheless try. Because if we want to rebuild back better, we must chart a way forward. And we must do so without holding out in hope that things will return to the pre-COVID days, but also without COVID constraining our vision of what a better future might bring about. Singapore ended 2019 in a strong position. We commemorated our bicentennial, recalling the founding of modern Singapore in 1819 and its role in history as a hub connecting people, goods, and services, as well as the evolution of our national identity. The mural in this picture is something which my ministry and our tripartite partners had created in August 2019, and which today takes pride of place in one of our offices. Economically, we did well in the 2010s. From 2010 to 2019, employment grew by 27% to 3.78 million. Median incomes grew in real terms by 33% and productivity by 32%. In fact, by the end of 2019, the labour market had experienced 9 consecutive quarters of growth. We spent the decade investing in Skills Future and helping workers transit to new careers through our Adapt and Grow programs. The tripartite partners reached consensus on how to support self-employed persons better and also agreed to progressively raise the retirement and re-employment ages so that senior workers who desired to continue working could do so. So when Singapore recorded its first case of COVID-19 in late January, we had already seen how much it had disrupted people's way of life, lives and livelihoods, especially in China. Singapore's response to the impact of COVID-19 in the labour market is really part of our national response to COVID, which we call SG United. What's SG United? Well, SG United is a rallying call for society to support frontline workers, frontline healthcare workers, to behave responsibly and to act in accordance with the advice of health authorities and so on. If 2019 was the year of the SG bicentennial, then 2020 is definitely the year of SG United. Our tripartite partners therefore saw ourselves responding too as part of SG United. Allow me to illustrate with a few examples of how the partners worked together in the last 6 months. First, by February, it was clear to all of us that Singapore's economy would be affected by the fall in global demand. So we convened the National Wages Council ahead of time in March in order to provide clearer tripartite guidance on how workers and how companies should respond. The Council sent a clear message that in dealing with the uncertainty of the months ahead, flexibility was crucial. So we asked employers to first consider time banking because this would preserve wages while allowing unworked hours to be credited and could be used when demand returned. Wage adjustment was also another option. We also made it clear that if employers had less need for their workers' time, they should not discourage their workers from seeking secondary jobs, especially to supplement any lost income. And finally, retrenchment would have to be a last resort, and if needed, should be carried out fairly. On its part, the government also announced a job support scheme worth $23.5 billion. The job support scheme provides a tiered wage support with up to 75% wage support going to the most heavily affected sectors, such as aviation and tourism. Within a few weeks of the announcements, businesses were receiving their first job support scheme payout, and they continue to do so up to today for as long as they retain and pay their local employees. It's important to remember that at a time when employers were already implementing cost-saving measures, and some already had no choice but to retrench their workers, it actually requires a lot of trust on the part of our workers and our unions to be comfortable that the employers would be using this wage support responsibly. That took a lot of trust, and our employers, to their credit, repaid that trust. In April, when Singapore entered its circuit breaker, in order to bring the number of COVID-19 cases under control, to save lives and to protect our healthcare system, overnight, the workforce moved into working from home by default. Again, this required employers and workers to cooperate at large scale and to adapt to new arrangements, which I'm glad to say they did without major disputes or major disruption. Then in June, Singapore convened the National Jobs Council in order to identify and develop jobs and skills opportunities for Singaporeans amidst the COVID-19 situation. It was also to rally and mobilize the tripartite partners and training providers to establish a sizable bank of opportunities catering to all sectors and to all skills levels so that we could help Singaporeans take full advantage of the available opportunities. We did this because we recognized that apart from periods of recession, Singapore had a tight labor market with extremely high employment rates and extremely low unemployment rates. So the risk that we were very mindful of was the danger of the loss of skills and human capital during a period of low labor demand caused by COVID-19. So out of the National Jobs Council, we launched SG United Jobs and Skills. And collectively, our ambition was to provide 100,000 opportunities to those who were displaced by COVID-19, and also to our young people who would be graduating this year into a very weak job market. For example, through SG United Jobs, furloughed workers from the aviation sector were hired into support jobs in the healthcare sector, which naturally was seeing a huge rise in demand. Through SG United traineeships, companies who were unable to hire in the current market could offer traineeships to a recent graduate so that the graduates could acquire industry-relevant work experience that will stand them in good stead as they continue their job search. The SG United Pathways program offers a similar approach for mid-career workers as the SG United traineeships. And finally, we had SG United Skills, which would allow our people to acquire new skills, which we expect will be in demand when the economy recovers. The natural response of businesses in a recession is to hunker down and try to survive the worst that was to come. And in a situation like this, it is typical that recruitment takes a backseat. So SG United Jobs and Skills was a very important effort to mobilize employers to look beyond the immediate and to do their part to give our people an opportunity to maintain their skills or to build up their human capital. So how have these responses worked for Singapore? Were they successful in preventing retrenchments and a rise in unemployment? Well, the answer is no. By the second quarter of 2020, our total employment, excluding foreign domestic workers, had fallen by more than 100,000. Retrenchments in the second quarter of 2020, when we were in the middle of our circuit breaker, were more than 8,000, and it was higher than the peak in 2003 when we battled SARS. But still, it was lower than the all-time high, which we saw in the 2009 global financial crisis. Unemployment rose to 2.8%, but over the same period, in the few months since its launch, SG United Jobs and Skills had already matched 25,000 people to opportunities. It will be unrealistic, of course, that a major shock like COVID-19, which expects to see Singapore's GDP shrink by -5% to -7% this year. It would be unrealistic to expect that this would leave the labour market untouched. But nevertheless, our collective SG United response has helped to moderate the worst effects. Our economists calculate that our job support scheme and other fiscal measures helped us to avoid a further 5.5% loss in real GDP and helped us to avoid an additional 1.7 percentage points increase in unemployment. We have also been able to sustain tripartite trust and to be able to come together to take difficult decisions for the greater good. A very good example is the recent settlement between Singapore Airlines and the Airline Pilots Association of Singapore. Now, as you might expect, an airline would be one of the businesses that will be the most heavily impacted by COVID-19. Despite this, the union agreed to accepting very significant wage cuts of up to 60% to the wages of some of its pilots, in exchange for the company committing not to retrench any more pilots all the way through to 2022. And the ability to reach this successful agreement shows that tripartite trust remains unshaken despite the very challenging conditions that all parties have had to face this year. Finally, let me turn to the future. What of it and what can we expect? Well, our focus now is on how we can emerge stronger together. And here I'd just like to highlight 2 points. One is to recognize that the situation we face at this moment is very different from what we faced earlier in the year. Earlier this year, it was unclear to us how COVID-19 would play out. Would demand, for example, quickly rebound as we saw in 2003, once the virus was successfully contained? So that is why it made sense then for companies not to rush to retrench their workers, and why wage support schemes like the job support scheme made sense. But today it is clearer that all across the world, industries and businesses are adapting to the COVID era. And some industries are unlikely to return to the pre-COVID days anytime soon. Hence, Singapore recently announced a pivot from relying entirely on the job support scheme to opening up a new jobs growth incentive worth $1 billion. And in doing so, we are signaling that the government will support businesses to create jobs early if they have the confidence in their business model, and not to hold back on the hiring of locals. At the same time, the job support scheme continues to provide support, but at a more modest level. We feel that this shift in emphasis is necessary so that we can encourage the economy to start to adjust to the new environment, while at the same time ensuring that important outcomes such as employment and employability are not affected. Second point, in recognition of a very different labour market, our tripartite National Wages Council has reconvened again for the second time this year. Our discussions are going well, and as expected, the theme of flexibility and also the theme of how wages should adjust as and when businesses recover has surfaced in our discussions, and we're making good progress in coming to an agreement on those in the weeks to come. So in conclusion, SG United has been a key unifying idea for us that we pursued collectively, not just amongst the tripartite partners, but as a society to overcome COVID-19. And SG United will continue to be our unifying theme as we focus now to emerge stronger in a post-COVID world. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.